So the Etruscan monarchs go and disappear, and the Roman Republic is formed. So we'll be talking about kind of how do we go and have this form of government, and you'll see it has similarities to Athens, but it's not exactly the same. It's going to have some very, very unique characteristics, which we'll be talking about. Now, a huge, huge legal document, something you need to know, one of the big codes that we talk about, we talked about Hammurabi's code before, that's the first, written law code in the world, are the 12 tables of law. Yes, there were 12, and yes, you could actually go, they were not made out of tables, unfortunately. There's two different groups in ancient Rome that you probably know about, you should see in the reading. There's the plebeians and there's the patricians. The plebeians are the people that are basically the majority of the population, and they're the lower class. And the patricians have all the rights, all the power, all the money. And the law was very, very arbitrary before. What I mean by this is the law wasn't written down. And it's kind of hard to go and say, hey, you're breaking the law when you go and you don't know what the law is. So the plebeian's actually going to go, and they're going to demand, hey, if you're going to go arrest me for something, you have to go put it in public. I have to see it in writing. So they demand it. And essentially what happens is the plebeians at some point went actually, the city was getting attacked, and the plebeians just were in the army. They walked away from the city and said, hey, patricians, we're going to let you get killed if you don't give us the 12 tables of law. So they start to use that power. And eventually, the 12 tables of law go up. They're on 12 different ivory tablets, and they're put in the Roman Forum, and everybody could go and read them. They established the doctrine, what's called the rule of law. And this is a huge legal concept. We still have it today. This is one of the reasons we study Rome, is like it goes and translates to today. The idea of the rule of law is that everybody is subject to the law. The law has higher authority than any person. Even like today, the president is subject to the law of the land being the Constitution. So the idea of the rule of law is that everybody is subject to the law, no matter who you are, plebeian or patrician, man or woman. What did these laws deal with? Well, they dealt with the typical things, if you think that laws would deal with. They would deal with inheritance, property ownership, who owns something, religious issues. So they deal with everything, is kind of my point there with that. Now, this conflict of orders, the conflict involves two different sides. The conflict of orders or the struggle of orders, is basically there was a political struggle over time between the two groups, the plebeians, the plebes, I have abbreviated them there, and then the patricians. Like I said, the plebeians were lower, the patricians were higher. Now, the plebeians, they had the numbers on their side. This is the Roman Forum, by the way, in case you didn't know that. The plebeians had the numbers on their side. They were necessary for defense. So essentially, the plebeians are going to go and get more rights. What you see in Rome is the plebeians are going to go be denied of their rights and go and get them through something such as the conflict of orders. They're going to go and essentially establish their own council, which is called, very originally, what we call the Council of Plebes. Initially, their rulings, it's like their own little government, their city council, something like that. They go and issue rulings just for the plebeians. They don't apply to the patricians. And what the Council of Plebes is going to do, they're going to go and the plebeians are going to fight against the oppression, the fact that the patricians are going and trying to push them down. And in Rome, eventually, the plebeians will get more rights. Basically, they're going to get more rights because they get more money. And with money comes power, as we know. Now, there's four main Roman political bodies that you need to know. There's the tribal assembly, the centuriate assembly, the plebeian assembly, and then the Senate. And I have the lovely Latin names there too. The Comitia Tributa, I know I'm probably saying these wrong, sorry for those of you in Latin. The Comitia Centuriate, Concilium Plebis, and the Senatus. Now, the tribal assembly, let's talk about that one first. Just like in Athens, if you remember how Athens was organized into different tribes, the tribal assembly was the democratic assembly of Roman citizens. What you had, there were basically 35 different tribes. There were 4 tribes that were the urban tribes, and then 31 were the rural tribes, and those were the cities outside of the city of Rome. The 4 were inside there. What happens is, in each tribe, each tribe gets a vote of the 35, no matter how many people are in the tribe, and they go and are able to kind of pass different matters. The person that was in charge of the tribal assembly was either a consul or a praetor, and we'll talk about that. The way the tribes were kind of similar, like congressional districts today, if you know that. The second part is the Centuriate Assembly. And the Centuriate Assembly is a specific type, because we don't have anything like this today. It is made up solely of soldiers. It's made up of people just from the army. And if you have a majority of votes in the century, that's what the century votes. So the Centuriate Assembly, basically what they're going to do is they're going to go and vote on different matters, such as they might serve in judicial cases, they might be a jury, they might go and give the power to go run the army to the consul, the power of imperium. So they're in charge of like military type stuff, if you would think about that. Then you have the plebeian assembly. That's what we talked about on the other one, the last one, the plebeian council. It could pass laws, elect magistrates, try judicial cases. Initially, this only applied to plebes. Eventually, it's going to go and have more powers. And then the Senate, the one that everybody knows because we have the idea of the Senate today. The Senate is a fixture. Of all these, it's the most important. Of the four, it's the most important, hence the last. They're basically going to go, if you're a senator, you're a big deal. Basically, what the Senate does is the Senate goes and gives advice to the different magistrates. We'll talk about the magistrates on the next slide here. They give advice, and when they give advice, they basically are telling the magistrate what to do. And the magistrate basically goes and just has to implement the laws. So they're going to go and direct what the consuls do. They basically are telling with the president what to do. We'll talk about the consuls. They do finances. They appoint a dictator. They are involved in all that. They go and basically say, are we going to go to war or not? An important feature of the Senate is something that's called filibuster, which we actually have. You may not know about it. We actually have it today in our Senate. And the idea of filibuster is you could actually go, every person in the Senate had the right to speak on a particular matter if they were going to go vote on it. And this person, if they technically didn't want somebody to go vote on it, they could filibuster. And with a filibuster, you keep on talking and talking and talking, and you can talk as long as you want. And as long as you keep on talking, you hold the floor, people can't vote. And people still sometimes do that in the U.S. Senate. You can go basically talk a bill to death. There's certain rules and stuff. But the idea is that you could go, and if you got it to nightfall, you could basically stop a proposal, which is kind of a cool thing. The idea here was to go and hopefully have some wisdom in how they ran their government. So let's talk about a few of their magistrates. Their magistrates are like their officials, if you want to write that down. Roman officials, the people that ran the Roman government. Now there's a Latin phrase that you need to know here called cursus honorum. And cursus honorum means there was a certain order to going and moving up in government. You would start as one magistrate, and hopefully if you're a really successful, savvy politician, you'll move up another level. And there's certain like age requirements. So if you're a certain age and you get it, like say the age requirement is 35 for a praetor, and you turn 35 and you're a praetor, like you're a big deal because you got it right when you were able to get it. These numbers here, 6, 4, 2, 2, indicate the number of people. So there's actually 6 quaestors they have the title quaestor at the same time. They have 2 consuls. So let's talk about them here. The quaestors, there's 6 of these dudes. What do? They're in charge of the money. They're the money guys. They control the state finances. So that's what they do. The aediles. What do? They maintain the public buildings and the regulation of public festival. They keep public order. There are 2 pairs of aediles. So they're basically going and moving up. You'd start as a quaestor, then move to an aedile, then hopefully make it up to a praetor. What is a praetor? It meant a couple different things. A praetor could be a commander in an army. They can go, and it depends what period of Roman history we're talking about. Mostly, if you want to go for praetor, you should write the word judge. They're a chief official judge. So you've moved up from quaestor to an aedile to a praetor, and the top dog, their version of a president, is called a consul. And the cool thing with a consul is that there's actually 2 people. They actually have to serve with each other. They serve for a 1-year term. And each consul had veto power over the other consul, so they would go and be able to check each other. They're the president. They're the highest military person. They're in charge of the religion. Like I said, they're actually elected by the Centuriate Assembly, but the Senate basically gives them the consent. If you were going to go and you were once a consul, say you've moved all the way up, you would become a proconsul, basically be like a governor of maybe some region once Rome gets larger. And initially, the consulship was only for the person who was a patrician, but it got opened up to plebeians as well. So the consulship is like the ultimate prize that you could have. Two other things that fit in that you need to know from Rome, but don't really fit into the cursus honorum, are the censors and the dictator. The censor supervised public morality. That's where we get the word censorship today. Like if something's seen as profane, it's going to be censored by the government. So they went and it was a very, very respected person because they kept the order in society. Now the dictator, you may have heard this before, this was a person who had absolute power for a period of time in a period, maybe a period of war. What would happen was the Senate, say there was going to go and there was a period of war, they would go in and appoint dictator powers for a certain period of time. Now my question here is, what does this indicate? These multiple members, there's 6 of these. It means they have to work together. It means these guys have to work together and there's a check and there's a moderating influence, even on the consuls, on the day-to-day type thing. The lack of that, if you see that with a dictator, well, why would that make sense? If you're in an emergency, sometimes you don't want people arguing, right? You go and we're under attack. You want the president to make decisions right then, right now. Hopefully they make the right decisions. The dictatorship is kind of that type of idea of an emergency. So that's the whole Roman Republican government and how the Republican government system worked. Specifically, we talked about the conflicts between the plebeians and patricians, and then there are 4 different assemblies, and then some of the different magistrates as well.